Chapter 2. Gold in the Ancient Economy. 1. The Lydian Innovation, the world's first gold coinage. Imagine conducting business in the ancient world. You have gold, I have grain. We want to trade. But first, we need a scale, a touchstone. We must verify weight and purity, every single transaction. The process is cumbersome, prone to fraud. This friction in commerce was finally eliminated in the 7th century BC in the Kingdom of Lydia, located in the fertile valleys of western Asia Minor. The Lydians, blessed by the gold-bearing sands of the river Pactolus, became the architects of the world's first official currency. The innovation began with electrum, a naturally occurring alloy of gold and silver, sometimes called white gold. But there was a problem. The ratio of gold to silver in raw electrum varied significantly from one riverbed to another. Its value was inherently unstable. The Lydian monarchs solved this, most notably King Alyattes, and later his son Croesus. They exercised sovereign authority over the metal. They refined the electrum, standardized its composition, struck it into small bean-shaped lumps of fixed weight. Then they impressed these lumps with the royal emblem, the iconic roaring lion. This seal meant something revolutionary. The merchant no longer needed to weigh the metal. He only needed to count the coins. The state provided a public guarantee of value. Under Croesus, whose name remains synonymous with immense wealth, this system underwent a second revolution, the introduction of bimetallism. Croesus moved beyond the unpredictable electrum alloy. He issued separate pure gold and pure silver coinage. This Croeseid coinage system established a fixed exchange ratio between the two metals, a flexible economy. Gold served as the high-value reserve for international trade and large purchases. Silver facilitated daily local transactions. This dual metal standard would serve as the blueprint for global monetary systems for the next 2.5 millennia. The economic impact was immediate, transformative. The standardization of gold into coinage birthed the concept of the marketplace, the agora. For the first time, retail trade could flourish. Prices could easily be compared and settled. Lydia became the wealthiest hub of the Mediterranean, acting as a bridge between the civilizations of the East and the emerging Greek city-states. The Lydian coin was not merely a piece of metal. It was a symbol of trust, backed by the power of the state. It transformed gold from a silent treasure hidden in temples into a dynamic engine of social mobility and commercial expansion. As the Lydian Empire eventually fell to the Persians, the concept of gold coinage did not perish. Instead, it was adopted and amplified by Cyrus the Great and Darius, who recognized that a standardized gold currency was the most effective tool for administering a vast multi-ethnic empire. The Lydian Lion paved the way for the Persian Daric, the Greek stater, eventually the Roman Aureus. In this sense, the small, stamped pieces of gold from the Pactolus River were the seeds from which the entire structure of modern global finance grew. 2. The Persian Daric, gold as an international medium of exchange. The Lydians invented gold coinage, but the Persians perfected it, made it global. Following the conquest of Lydia by Cyrus the Great in 546 BC, the Achaemenid Empire inherited not only vast treasure, but also the revolutionary concept of standardized metallic currency. Under Darius I, Darius the Great, this inheritance was transformed into a sophisticated tool of imperial administration. Darius understood something crucial. A sprawling empire, stretching from the Indus Valley to the Aegean Sea, required more than military might. It needed a unified economic language. This language was the Daric, a thick gold coin of remarkable purity that would dominate international trade for over 2 centuries. The Persian Daric famously depicted the king as a royal archer in a kneeling posture, struck from gold of nearly 98% purity, a level of refinement that commanded absolute trust across borders. Unlike the earlier Lydian electrum, the Daric was a mono-metallic standard of value, representing a fixed weight of approximately 8.4 grams. This consistency made the Daric the first world currency. Whether in the markets of Athens, the temples of Babylon, or the ports of Egypt, the archer's image was recognized as a guarantee of intrinsic worth. It was the gold standard of the ancient world, predating the British sovereign or the American dollar by more than 2 millennia. The Daric's influence extended far beyond simple commerce. It became a powerful instrument of Persian soft power. The great kings realized that gold could achieve what the spear often could not. By flooding the Greek city-states with darics, the Persians could influence internal politics, fund mercenary armies, bribe rival generals to defect. When Agesilaus of Sparta was forced to retreat from Asia because of Persian-funded rebellions at home, he famously remarked that he had been driven out by 30,000 archers, not soldiers, coins. The coins that had bribed his enemies. Gold had become the silent architect of geopolitics, a liquid force that could dissolve alliances and secure frontiers without a single drop of blood being spilled. The Persian system also established the first massive centralized reserve. The Achaemenids didn't merely circulate gold, they hoarded it in immense quantities within the treasuries of Susa, Ecbatana, and Persepolis. This hoarding wasn't stagnation, it was strategy. By controlling the flow of gold into the Mediterranean, the Persian treasury could stabilize its own economy while pressuring others. This was the first time in history that a state actively managed its gold reserves to maintain imperial stability, a precursor to the modern functions of central banks. The reign of the Daric came to a dramatic end with Alexander the Great. When Alexander sacked the Persian capitals, he discovered tens of thousands of talents of gold stored in royal vaults, the accumulated wealth of centuries. By melting down this Persian hoard and reissuing it as his own coinage, Alexander fueled a massive inflationary wave that transformed the economic of the Hellenistic world. But the legacy of the Daric remained. It had taught the world that gold was the only medium capable of binding diverse nations into a single, interconnected economic system. 3. Monetary evolution in Greece, from cattle to the stater. The monetary history of ancient Greece provides a fascinating window into the evolution of value. In the earliest stages of Greek civilization, as depicted in the Homeric epics, money was not a metallic object, it was a living one. The standard of value was the ox, or the cow. In the Iliad, Homer describes the armor of Diomedes as being worth 9 oxen, while that of Glaucus was worth 100. This primitive bovine standard worked for a pastoral society, but as the Greek city-states began to emerge as maritime trading powers, the limitations became clear. Livestock lacked portability, divisibility, durability. These became insurmountable barriers to economic growth. The transition from cattle to metal began with utensil money. Before coins, the Greeks used iron or copper spits, known as obeloi. A handful of 6 obeloi was called a drachma, meaning a handful, a term that would survive as a currency denomination for nearly 3,000 years. However, it was the influence of the Lydians to the east that eventually pushed the Greeks toward precious metals. The Greeks quickly recognized that gold and silver were far superior to iron or cattle. They concentrated immense value in a small, indestructible form. By the late 7th and early 6th centuries BC, Greek city-states began to strike their own coinage, replacing the organic wealth of the past with the mineral wealth of the future. The introduction of the stater, meaning standard or weight, represented the pinnacle of Greek monetary art and science. While many cities, such as Athens, initially preferred silver due to the abundance of the laurium mines, gold was always the ultimate reserve. The gold staters of Cyzicus and Lampsacus became the international trade dollars of the Aegean. These coins were not merely chunks of metal, they were profound expressions of civic identity. Each city-state stamped its stater with a unique emblem: the owl for Athens, the Pegasus for Corinth, the turtle for Aegina, effectively turning gold into a carrier of political sovereignty and cultural pride. This evolution had deep philosophical implications. Greek thinkers began to grapple with the difference between use value and exchange value, the utility of an ox versus the abstract worth of a gold coin. Aristotle, in his Politics, noted that money was a necessary invention to facilitate trade over long distances, serving as a guarantor of future exchanges. The shift to gold staters allowed for the accumulation of liquid capital, which in turn funded the monumental architecture of the Parthenon, the naval fleets that defeated the Persians, and the flourishing of the arts and sciences. By the time of the Peloponnesian War, the Greek world had moved entirely from a pastoral economy to a sophisticated financial system based on metallic weight. Gold had triumphed over the ox. However, this transition also introduced the first instances of monetary crisis and debasement, as city-states occasionally diluted the purity of their coins to pay for war. This period proved that while gold was a perfect metal, the human systems managing it were often fragile, a lesson that would be repeated throughout the history of currency. 4. The Roman bronze standard and the shift to precious metals. The monetary history of Rome is a mirror of its imperial trajectory, beginning with the humble, heavy bronze of a regional republic, culminating in the glittering gold of a world empire. In its infancy, Rome was a conservative, agrarian society. It viewed the sophisticated gold and silver coinage of the Greeks and Carthaginians with suspicion. The earliest Roman medium of exchange was vice rude, unformed lumps of bronze valued by weight. This later evolved into the ice grave, massive cast bronze coins that symbolized Roman virtues, gravity, and stability. In this early Bronze Age of Roman finance, gold was treated not as currency, but as a sacred reserve, stored in the temple of Saturn, touched only in times of extreme national peril. The shift toward precious metals was forced upon Rome by the necessities of global war. During the Punic Wars, especially the existential struggle against Hannibal, the Roman Republic realized that bronze was too heavy, too localized, for the logistical demands of a Mediterranean conflict. To pay for naval fleets, to hire foreign mercenaries, Rome began to issue its first silver denarii. However, it was not until the 1st century BC, during the era of the great generals like Sulla, Julius Caesar, and Pompey, that gold moved from the shadows of the treasury to the forefront of the economy. The enormous spoils of war provided the bullion, gold looted from the palaces of the East, the mines of Gaul. This provided the metal necessary to sustain a permanent gold coinage. Julius Caesar was the first to issue gold on a truly massive and regular scale. His gold aureus, struck with his own image, was a revolutionary act, political propaganda and economic consolidation. By establishing a fixed ratio between the gold aureus and the silver denarii, initially 1 aureus equals 25 denarii, Caesar created a tiered monetary system that could support both the vast expenditures of the state and the daily commerce of the citizens. Under his successor, Augustus, this system was perfected. Augustine's reforms solidified the gold standard as the bedrock of the Pax Romana, ensuring that a merchant in Roman Britain could trade with a merchant in Egypt using a single universally accepted currency. However, the shift to gold brought new vulnerabilities. As Rome expanded, its demand for luxury goods from the East grew. Silks from China, spices from India. This created a perpetual drain of gold. Pliny the Elder lamented that the empire was being bled dry of its precious metals to satisfy the vanity of the wealthy. Furthermore, as the costs of maintaining the legions grew, later emperors began the disastrous practice of debasement, reducing the weight and purity of the silver coinage while desperately trying to maintain the integrity of the gold aureus. This created a dual economy, a stable gold world for the elite and the military, and a collapsing inflated silver and bronze world for the common people. In the long term, the Roman shift to gold was both a symptom and a cause of its greatness. It provided the liquidity needed to govern the largest empire the Western world had ever seen, but it also tied the fate of the empire to the physical supply of the metal. When the mines of Spain and Dacia were eventually exhausted or lost to barbarian incursions, the Roman monetary machine began to grind to a halt. The story of the Roman Aureus thus serves as a cautionary tale. Gold could build an empire, but the inability to manage its flow could also lead to its undoing. 5. The Imperial Aureus, gold during the Roman Republic and Empire. As Rome transitioned from a chaotic republic to centralized empire under Augustus, the aureus became the ultimate instrument of imperial hegemony. While silver and bronze circulated for the mundane transactions of the plebeians, gold was the language of the state, the army, the high aristocracy. The imperial aureus was more than just currency. It was a mobile monument, carrying the idealized portrait of the Caesar to the furthest reaches of the known world, from the rainy frontiers of Britannia to the sun-drenched ports of the Red Sea. The technical precision of the Roman mints during this era reached unprecedented levels. The aureus was maintained at a high standard of purity, often exceeding 95% fine gold, to ensure that it remained the global reserve of its time. For the Roman legionnaire, receiving his pay in gold was a primary bond of loyalty to the emperor. The stability of the empire depended on the emperor's ability to provide these gold coins. When a new emperor ascended the throne, one of his first acts was to strike a new series of aurii, not only to facilitate trade, but to broadcast his legitimacy, his specific virtues, such as liberalitas, generosity, or victoria, victory, through the reverse designs of the coins. During the 1st and 2nd centuries AD, often called the Golden Age of Rome, the aureus facilitated an early form of globalization. The abundance of gold, fueled by state-controlled mines in Spain and later Dacia, allowed for a period of relatively stable prices and booming international commerce. Roman gold coins have been found as far away as southern India and Vietnam, proving that the aureus was the preferred medium for the high-value spice and silk trades. This era demonstrated the classic gold standard of antiquity, a system where a single, trusted, high-purity gold unit governed the wealth of diverse nations under a unified legal framework. However, this golden facade began to crack as the empire faced the crisis of the 3rd century. As military expenditures spiraled and new gold discoveries vanished, the central government could no longer maintain the weight or purity of the aureus. Emperor Constantine eventually replaced the failing aureus with the solitus in the 4th century. The solitus was a slightly lighter coin, but its purity was so strictly guarded that it remained the standard of international trade for another 700 years, long after the Western Roman Empire had fallen. This transition from the aureus to the solitus marked the shift from ancient to medieval economic structures, ensuring that the Roman golden legacy would endure through the Byzantine era. In summary, the imperial aureus was the zenith of ancient monetary achievement. It proved that a gold-based economy could sustain a vast, complex civilization, provided that the supply of metal was secure and the integrity of the mint was maintained. Its eventual decline served as a grim reminder. Even the most powerful empire is ultimately subject to the physical limits of its precious metal reserves.